welcome to the Deep Dive. Okay, so our mission today is pretty straightforward. Cut through all the noise from recent global events and pull out the really important stuff for you. Think of it as a quick tour, hitting some surprising facts and connections. Hopefully, you'll leave feeling properly informed on a whole mix of topics from around the world.
Absolutely. And we're really aiming to connect some dots here, maybe between things that don't seem related at first glance. It's about providing context, why these specific details actually matter in the bigger picture. We want to help you get past just what happened to really digging into what it means. So, yeah, consider the implications as we go.
Okay, let's kick off with some economic ripples then, starting with President Trump's latest moves. Reports are framing them almost playfully as love letters. But, well, let's be clear, they were warnings about potential tariffs, right?
Stark warnings, exactly. Aimed at, 14 countries, including big players like Japan, India, South Korea. And our sources even playfully threw in Wakanda as being on this, let's call it, naughty list.
Right. Right. A clear move to pressure trade partners.
But what's really interesting, or maybe confusing, is the market's immediate reaction, or lack thereof. Markets seemed pretty much unfazed. Investors were left scratching their heads a bit.
Which tells you something about how these threats are maybe being perceived now, doesn't it?
It really does. And speaking of confusion, look at the Australian dollar. It did this complete backflip. The Reserve Bank held interest rates when, everyone was betting on a cut.
So the dollar jumped.
It did, but perspective is key. Analysis suggests it's still barely worth more than a cup of coffee at the airport. It just highlights how unpredictable global economics can be and how psychology often drives those initial market reactions, maybe more than the immediate facts.
And it's not just a one-way street with these trade issues. China hit back pretty quickly, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. The response was swift. One source described it like that friend who flips the Monopoly board when they're losing.
Huh. Okay, so what did they actually do?
They activated what's being called retaliation mode. Specifically, and this is the big one, threatening to cut supply chains.
Wow, okay, cutting supply chains.
Exactly. And when a massive global player like China makes that threat, it's not just symbolic, it really throws a spotlight on how, maybe fragile these efficient global supply chains actually are. A single threat can expose weaknesses people hadn't really considered. It affects everything: consumer goods, manufacturing costs. Everything's connected.
Deeply interconnected, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so while trade is choppy, there's another big sector, energy, showing, almost the opposite, surprising stability.
That's a good way to put it. OPEC plus P, the big group of oil producers, they announced they're going to pump more oil in August.
You'd think that would shake things up, right? More supply.
You would think, but the market basically yawned. Reports said it immediately fell asleep. Oil prices dipped just a tiny bit. Gold barely moved.
So what does that tell us? Complacency?
Maybe complacency, maybe a feeling that supply and demand are kind of balanced right now, or perhaps just, inertia. But these decisions by OPEC Plus and how the market reacts or doesn't react, they really do filter down to the gas pump, to big investment strategies. It all matters.
Okay, so complex economics, and we're seeing similar, maybe contradictory dynamics in diplomacy too. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu met in Washington. Reports say they, quote, whispered about a Gaza ceasefire.
Right. A specific proposal mentioned was for, 60 days of maybe not bombing each other, as one source dryly put it. Sounds like progress, maybe?
You'd hope so, a step towards calming things down.
But then almost immediately after those talks, the announcement comes that the U.S. is sending more weapons to Ukraine.
So peace talks here, more weapons there.
Exactly. It's a real paradox, isn't it? It forces you to look critically at how international diplomacy actually works. You have these peace overtures happening alongside continued military aid. It really shows the often contradictory nature of foreign policy and how these decisions shape things on the ground fast.
Okay, let's shift from those high-level talks to something very much on the ground and unfortunately quite tragic, really grim news coming out of Texas. The floods there. The death toll is now over 100 lives.
Just devastating, especially around the Guadalupe River area, it seems.
And a really concerning detail that's emerged. Apparently, early warning systems in some of those areas had been cut. Budget reasons, reportedly.
And it's a heartbreaking reminder of the human cost when disaster strikes and how vital that infrastructure, that preparedness really is. There was this one bit of commentary, quite satirical, but it hits hard. Something like, Google still says it's 12 minutes to the grocery store via kayak.
Wow. Yeah, that paints a picture.
It really underscores the severity, but also the terrible irony when essential systems aren't funded or maintained. It brings it right home, doesn't it? How local budget decisions can have these massive consequences for community safety when facing, these environmental challenges.
Such a tough situation there. Okay, let's shift continents now for something quite different. A potentially historic moment in Iran.
Yes, really significant news. Reports of record-breaking female voter turnout in their recent election.
Record-breaking. That feels like a big deal.
It is. Many are calling it historic, especially for the region. This level of participation, particularly by women, in a context that's often seen as, well, resistant to these kinds of shifts, it sends a powerful signal.
A signal of change.
Definitely. Social change, increased democratic engagement, it implies a lot. And, our sources picked up on this amusing, but also quite telling detail. Apparently, some Iranian men are still trying to Google how to undo democracy.
Seriously.
Provides a bit of counterpoint, doesn't it? But it really makes you think about that global push towards greater democratic participation, what it means for gender roles, political engagement.
No.
It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Okay, sticking with global leaders, let's talk about India's Prime Minister Modi. He's been on quite a trip.
An extensive one. An 8-day world tour, wasn't it?
Yeah, covered a lot of ground. From Ghana all the way to Argentina, shaking a lot of hands.
And these kinds of high-level diplomatic tours, they're incredibly important, even if they seem like just photo ops sometimes. Leaders are aiming to do, well, everything. Strengthen alliances, secure trade deals, boost their country's influence on the world stage.
It's relationship building on a massive scale.
Exactly. One source cheekily suggested he shook more hands than Google does search queries.
Oh, yeah.
But it illustrates the point, right? These face-to-face engagements are actively shaping international cooperation, global power dynamics. It's how leaders build those future relationships.
Right, making those connections. Okay, and for our final piece, something, well, unexpected perhaps, bridging old traditions and new tech.
Go on.
Competitive chess. It's now officially an esport.
Wow, chess as an esport.
Yep. And we're not talking small stakes either. There's apparently a prize pool of $70 million involved.
$70 million for chess. That's incredible.
It certainly changes the story for anyone like me, maybe, whose mom used to say, stop gaming, you'll never make money from that.
Ha. It really makes you reconsider the definition of sport, doesn't it? And it speaks volumes about the undeniable explosive growth of the whole esports industry.
Huge implications, I guess.
Big cultural and economic ones, yeah. You've got this very traditional cerebral game entering this incredibly lucrative digital arena. It's blurring those lines between traditional competition and digital entertainment. Really challenges you to think about how tech is creating new paths, redefining excellence.
What a fascinating mix we've covered then. From global economics and tricky diplomacy, to social shifts in Iran, the tragedy in Texas, and now esports chess. Our goal, as always, is just to try and make this complex world a bit more accessible for you, help you connect those dots.
And maybe that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to sort of chew on. In this world just flooded with information coming from everywhere, sometimes with weird details or even satire mixed in, what's your strategy? How do you make sure you're not just, informed, but actually well-informed? How do you connect those dots yourself, filter out the noise, and figure out the next important question to ask? Keep that curiosity going, and, keep engaging critically with it all.